Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm just fascinated by this poster. It looks like it came right out of my childhood. The Rogue Theater and, there it is, Lone Ranger. It's going to be, let's let my guest describe to you. Both guests are interested in golden age of radio. Lynn, why don't you tell us a little bit about golden age of radio?
Yes, we're doing 4 shows to begin with, and we're doing the Lone Ranger, the Green Hornet. We're doing, what was the other one? Suspense. I'm in Suspense, and then the other one was, it's marked there.
There's a shadow.
The Shadow. The Shadow knows.
The Shadow.
The Shadow knows, and we are putting them on KJO Radio. Beginning in February. And
okay, so this is true radio on radio.
It's true radio, and we have actually a table set up for sound effects, and I get to help that, and it's great. We have these little feet that we clog along, and then we have the coconut shells to be the horse's hooves.
Oh, I was trying to be horse's hoofs, and they were out of sync.
It's really kind of interesting. And then we have all the actors on stage with microphones doing the original scripts, so it's quite fun.
Well, introduce this to your guest.
This is my friend Flora Albano. She's a local actress, and she gets to do several segments in the show called How It Was, or What It Was, and she will tell what happened at certain dates in these years, in these 40s.
Oh,
and
because that was
that's
the way
exciting.
It was.
That's the way it was.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, I was asking you a little earlier about Mrs. Watts, Mildred Watts.
Oh, yes. Mildred.
You know, I knew Mildred had a part in this group way back when.
Barnstormers Theater, actually.
Yeah, well, her dad is the one who started the Barnstormers Theater. Oh gosh, they had their 50th anniversary. What was about 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it?
And it's
the 50th
oldest,
anniversary, and it's the oldest community theater
on the West Coast.
In the West, yeah,
I think so.
Yeah.
Right here in beautiful
Right here
Southern
in beautiful
Oregon.
Southern Oregon in Grants Pass.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Oh, what other things have you done that tie into history? The theater itself.
The theater itself, basically.
It was saved from the wrecking ball.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about the history of the Barnstormers, but
well, when they first started here, they didn't have a building, of course, or a theater as such. And I understand that they used to do a lot of shows over in Riverside Park, in the park itself, before they got the building and got the theater set up.
Now, when you say theater, I think of that building as a church.
Well, it used to be a church. And
down in Riverside Park?
No. The Riverside Park was the park. The building that the Barnstormers is in now in Evelyn.
Kesterson Park, that's what I was trying to say.
Oh, yeah, that's right there. But
6th Street, right just
Evelyn,
before the dog leg?
Just before 6th and 7th.
You know, that street used to be called, it had a different name. And somehow they named it 6th Street. If you notice, the other streets go from Lawn Ridge to...
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
4th, 5th, 3rd, anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, Lawn Ridge is 3rd.
And Conklin.
And 6th Street was Orchard.
Oh, really?
That's
How
great.
Interesting.
That's a little
bit of history.
A little bit of history.
I never
well,
knew
no wonder
that
I
before.
feel comfortable on it. I was born on Orchard Avenue, way back on the East Coast. But that's interesting that was Orchard. Yeah.
What brought you to Oregon and God's country?
Because it was God's country. I was living in West LA, and I had decided I had to get out of there because of the congestion and just lots of things, and I had decided that year I was going to move. And I wondered where to start looking, and someone said, why don't you go up to Oregon, Grants Pass? And I took a ride up, and as I came up, all I kept thinking was, I'm in God's country. This is God's country. I thought it was just so beautiful. So that was it.
And it truly is.
And that, you know, and I had I stayed at the Redwood Motel, And they, at that time, had a place that was almost like a little apartment. And looked around here, and I found these lots, and I just felt at home on the lot. And that, you know, whatever it took, that was going to be it.
Well, my dad was coming from LA to Seattle on this truck he was hauling, and he came to Grants Pass, and his friend Fred Dayton had already moved here, and he said, "This is where I'm going to raise my family."
Lucky you.
But he had no family. No, he wasn't married.
But he was thinking ahead.
He knew first things first.
Yeah.
That's 1933. So, well, now this has brought you together, the different kinds of stories. Oh, I got to go to a Barnstormers play. It was so nice. You've done a lot of things, right?
Yes.
Some touch history and some touch hearts.
Yes. I started acting, and I was a singer in California, and because I moved from Klamath down to California when I was a young girl, and did a lot of things down there, and then came back up here because my parents lived here and they needed help, so I moved back to Grants Pass.
Well, why don't you tell us about Klamath Falls?
Well, Klamath Falls. I was born in Klamath Falls, but I was raised in Tule Lake, south of Tule Lake, which was called Newell, and that actually was where the Japanese internment camp was during the war. And my father, and I brought the Life magazine today. This is my only claim to fame. I'm a cover girl. There's a picture of my family. My dad was a veteran. He was a pilot in World War II. In fact, he was a decorated veteran. He had the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Certificate of Valor and many things. But to qualify, he won this homestead. And what happened is they drained Tule Lake and created homesteads. And to be eligible to be to be put in this drawing, you had to have $2,000 in the bank, you had to have 2 years of farming experience, and you had to be a good man of moral character and good moral fiber and all of these things. And then they put all the names in a big pickle jar and they shook them.
A pickle jar?
In a pickle jar, and they shook them, and my dad was one of the people that was drawn. And we had 77 acres of farm.
Now, he'd gone from military duty. Mm-hmm. Where was he before this?
He actually lived in Tule. He lived in Tule Lake, actually.
Oh,
his parents were there, yes.
Well, now, so you know lots about the internment and...
Yes, in fact, many people in Tule Lake worked at the internment camp. And in fact, our first buildings that we lived in, were actually the Japanese buildings that were in the Japanese camp.
Now, you're talking about this Life magazine here.
No.
Right? Is this?
No, this is later. They came back 4 years later, and my father had built the brick house, and they came back to see how we had fared after this first.
Because right there it looks like
we're standing actually in the middle of one of the fields that on the property that he won in this one, and then they came back in 4 years to see how he had fared. And there's a picture in here that's kind of interesting. It shows that and I don't know where it is. It shows that the buildings that I can't remember how many buildings they actually got, but I think we had 3 on our homestead. So when you won the homestead, so you got the buildings from the, these are the buildings.
So they
actually moved the buildings from the internment camp, and they took them to the different homesteads. So we had 3, and we lived in one until Dad got the house built.
Now this internment camp, there's quite a story about it. It is unbelievable that the whole idea that our neighbors and friends were potential enemies. Mm-hmm. But Tule Lake had the unfortunate privilege. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know too much about the history of that. How how they decided that they were going to put it there. I don't really know that much about it. It wasn't really discussed when I was growing up there.
No,
it just was something we didn't really talk about a great deal.
There was a camp all over, I mean, clear out in Nebraska, I know they had camps, but if there was someone who chose not to sign on the dotted line saying, hey, I'm now an American, or even if they weren't, then they were sent to Tule Lake as being, I don't know the right word, forgive me over there if I call them incorrigible, or if I find...
Yes. I do that is true.
Nice folk that lived in your neighborhood who did not, for reason of their own conscience. Heartbreaking story. I would love to have one of the Japanese who
was actually
family members. I know the one family received a redemptive fee, and they gave the entire amount for all 6 or 8 family members to the Loma Linda Hospital, because they didn't wish the money, but they thanked people for saying, hey, we were wrong. We were wrong. Church people and family people and, you know.
But I do remember the stories of my family telling that there were definitely people in the camp that would have done anything for their country while they were in the camp, and there were some dangerous sorts that were at that time, and they would have helped the Japanese war effort if they had not been in the camp. So I do know that there was that element, because I had been told that, but it doesn't dismiss the fact that they were put there. I mean,
I don't know if it was the Osakas or just whom, but I understood from someone who had gone to school with this young man, and he was pulled out of school and sent to camp, and then pulled out of camp. Well, the talk was, you know, he's a troublemaker.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They've isolated him. Turns out Douglas MacArthur wanted him as his own personal aide and translator.
Really?
And that's, you know, he had gone to the highest level of saving our nation or supporting. All right, this is your picture, huh?
No, that's actually of the Metzes. They were also another couple that won, and they're looking out across. This is actually a Tule Basin where a lot of the farms were. But this is there's a little article in here showing how their reaction when their name was drawn. And again, this is of my family walking and looking at the Japanese buildings that we would get.
Well, you say my family, point out you.
Well, this little teeny thing, this little young teeny thing is me.
And your brother?
My brother Larry, he still lives in Klamath Falls. He works for the Rapid Transit over there. And my mom and dad are both deceased. They died about, I guess, 2 and 3 years ago.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
I'm told that these buildings, and Klamath Falls, we know from just watching the news, wherever you are, the lowest temperature in our area is often Klamath
Falls.
And some of these were little more than tar paper.
That's exactly what they were. They were tar paper, and we lived in those. And I can remember how cold it was. We had a wood-burning stove in the middle of one, and we kept it going because it was very cold. Of course, the restroom facilities, the toilets were outside, and in Tule Lake, it got very cold and very snowy at that time. And being a little tiny girl, I can remember trudging out through the snow. It was not fun.
That was the way it was, folks.
That's the way it was.
That is the
life
way.
in the real world.
And what was your family's attitude about winning this lottery?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely good fortune, you know. And my father was always considered a very, very lucky man. Number one, being a pilot and going through the war and coming home safe. And I think it was I can't remember for certain, but I think it was half of the kids that he went to training camp with did not come home.
The flight school was 50%.
Yeah, 50% did not come home during World War II. And he was in some scrapes, but I talked to my son who's in California this morning, and he said, well, one of my favorite Papa Dale stories was that he said he came home to work, and he was working with my uncle on his homestead, because his father was a homesteader in the 30s. So
In Klamath.
yes, in the Newell area, the Tule Lake area.
And their names?
They're Loisel. And he said, my son was telling me that my dad worked for Uncle Leroy. That was Uncle Leroy Loisel. Everybody in Tule Lake knows my Uncle Leroy Loisel. He was a wonderful man. And apparently Dad would be working alongside Uncle Leroy, and Uncle Leroy would be throwing bales of hay, 2 and 3 at a time in the back of the truck, and my dad would be sweating and doing one at a time and thinking, oh, I had it so good in the service. I didn't know how fun it was and how much hard work this farming is. But yeah, so
Because
interesting.
a lot of the work was done literally by hand,
Oh, yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because machinery was hard to come by.
It was very hard to come by, and you shared. It was a wonderful thing. In fact, my grandmother, it was quite funny that this is my grandmother, whose husband had Loisel, who had the farm. Someone came over and borrowed the rake, and she said, "Sure, just take it." And then, Uncle Leroy comes in and goes, "Mom, where's that rake?" And she goes, "Well, so-and-so came and borrowed it." And he goes, "Who?" They never saw the rake again.
Oh, no.
But it was just typical. If you needed a tractor or you needed something, you borrowed it from other folks. So.
And there was some cooperation.
Absolutely.
You work on my
Absolutely.
harvest, and
Yeah.
what all did you grow on their property?
We grow potatoes mostly, potatoes and wheat.
Nothing like a Klamath spud.
Yeah. And,
We've got the potato lady that comes over with 50 pounds to sell
I
us
know
every
it.
year.
Yeah. And we got, as a teenager, we got to grow up. Our money was made weeding the potato fields. So
Instead of hops, you had potatoes.
we had potatoes. Yeah. But my dad was a bit of a male chauvinist in the fact that I didn't have to work really hard in the fields because I was the girl and I was supposed to stay around in the house. But my cousin, Mavis Loisel, she's now Mavis Kreisenbach, and she married a fellow from Tule Lake as well, who's Ron Kreisenbach, and they were from the same place. She worked in the fields all the time with her father and irrigated potatoes and all of this, but I didn't have to work quite as hard as she did.
Sort of like my dad. Hey, sis, let's go and
go out and do it, and that's what they did.
Yeah. We always wondered why he called us sis.
Well,
it
and
was
that's-
easier than.
Yep, and that's what you were called. Hey, sis,
Yeah. Now, I was so taken by the scarf you're wearing. Why don't you just share a little bit of the?
I was up in Seattle visiting my cousin Mavis Kreisenbach, and she pulled this out and gave it to me. And I wish I would have written down where it came from.
But it's some third world
It's some
country.
third world country, and they make these scarves, and then these ladies sell them, and the money goes to the women of these countries to
That's
help them.
wonderful.
And it's absolutely gorgeous. But I wish I would have taken notes, because at my age the things kind of tend to come in and go out.
Taking notes, folks. I'll tell you, you have stories. You have stories that you could write down, tape record, tell your grandkids. Oh, we'd love to have it. There's no way except seniors taking younger
That's right.
people under their wings, and I find myself to be a senior now.
I know it.
Nobody even winked when they
I
said,
know.
you get the senior discount. That's fine. I come by it honestly.
Honestly, that's right.
1938 was a long time ago, but I didn't meet you in Klamath Falls.
No.
Nor did I meet you at the Barnstormers.
No.
But I met you in a wonderful way. Shall we talk about the historic Rogue River?
Well, we met at Galice, actually.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And one of the fun things to me about Galice is that we have a community center, and we get together and have these nice little parties. They're potlucks, and to me, my favorite one is the Christmas party, when we have the little gift exchange, and it's just seeing people with their kids, and everybody comes and everybody shares. In fact, it reminds me of things that my parents did when we were growing up on the farm. They went always had grange dances and potlucks. It was just part of it. And growing up on the Rogue River, you know, here, all these people have lived here in Galice for years, and there's a lot of history there about the Rogue.
And they tell their stories. And it's Carpenter's Store, which is now Community Center. And it was there that you started telling me about a tent you live in. I go, excuse me, but winter's coming on, and you're living in a tent.
Oh my goodness.
I went there. What do you call your compound,
It's called Buckhorn Mountain Lodge.
your estate?
Our estate. We started building a bed and breakfast about, actually we've lived there about 5 years now, and we started building it at that time.
First was the tree house?
First was the tree house, and it's actually not a tree house. It's a house built on a deck in the trees, but we've named it the tree house. That was our first room. Our second one was we had permission to build a tent, and we actually have permission from the county to build 2 more tents, but they're very high maintenance. We have learned they're incredibly high maintenance.
Now, when you think of a tent, I'm sure you're thinking army tents or pup tents or whatever else.
Camping tents.
This is a class act, maybe like would have been in the.
I like to think of it as a campaign kind of a tent, maybe. It's called a wall tent, and it's actually 700 square feet. So there's a separate bathroom, and it has a jacuzzi tub and a shower. So it's quite comfortable. But we are living in a tent. So when what happened is we decided to tear down the old house and start rebuilding our new house. And so we said, well, a tent's a nice place. It's the best place. We'll live in that. But it's drug on a little longer than we imagined. So now we're wintering in the tent. But I tell people, they say, what are you doing now, Lynn? I go, well, I'm homeless and living in a tent. And it would take them back a bit, and then they would go, I have seen your tent.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
Oh, it is just and when you're not living in the tent, it's for rent?
Yes. We've been closed this year.
Just like the treehouse.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you're right across the street from
Hog Creek.
of the Hog Creek, where you can put in your
That's right.
little inner tube or rowboat or whatever.
Or your fishing vessel.
Ah.
Yeah.
And that's where I've been out to push off in a raft going down the river. Now, is this part of the fun for you, to create from nothing?
Absolutely.
I mean, whether it's mother and father out here on Pioneer, well, this wasn't even land, was it? It was a lake.
Yeah, it was a lake before they drained it, and very fertile soil, and then they divided it up and decided to have lotteries for the. So it's taking, and I do think that's part of my background, is taking nothing and making something from it, is creating and having to be frugal with things. And so, I mean, when I decorate my lodge, it's done from me buying either secondhand things or from antiques and redoing them or recovering furniture. I do think it comes from my background. You made do with what you had, or you created other things.
And we clean the mayonnaise jar before we throw it out, don't we?
We didn't throw the mayonnaise jars out. We reused them.
We recycled. Now you remember
everything.
tough times, right?
Well, yes, but my history is totally very different.
Right.
From the East Coast in a very small town, and
you've lived a few winters and summers.
Yes, lots of winters and summers. Yeah.
And we can learn a lot from you, and I am so glad you came on TV today. And
well, thank you. I appreciate it. I was just coming along for moral support, but we actresses, just any opportunity.
I hear you.
You're in a play currently.
Yes, we're in rehearsal.
Rehearsal.
Out of the frying pan. It's a comedy, and it's going to be at the barn. We open February 11th at the Barnstormers.
Well,
we're in rehearsal.
I guess it somehow got into my blood too, because when Channel 5 was having their 50th anniversary of the TV, I went, I was there the night that they opened. Yeah. And so then they said, oh, come do a show. And so I did a little, and then they had us do little shorts, happy birthday, tune
Yes,
into,
yes.
and then it was very interesting. And then, fortunately, they returned the favor and did a show with me here. So it's been
wonderful.
great fun. Patsy Smullen and, oh dear, forgot the, they came over. Better Life Television is here. It's here as a community project, and you're talking about other community projects. Would you encourage people to go to Galice?
Absolutely.
How about
Absolutely.
Tule Lake?
Absolutely.
What can they do in Tule Lake?
I don't really know. Tule Lake is not the Tule Lake that I grew up in or that my parents grew up in. But Klamath Falls, go visit Klamath Falls.
The museum in Klamath Falls, the Armory, is a gorgeous museum. And then that hotel, I'll tell you, if you get a Baldwin Hotel tour, they're only open in the summer, and there's another museum over there besides, which is up north a ways. And I've not been yet, but I'm waiting for someone. And there's a paddle wheel boat on there.
Yes, there is.
Have you been on it?
No, I never have.
And you can take a tour on that.
Yes, you can.
Lots of things to see and do. Plan now to enjoy. Turn off the TV, after the show that is, and explore our world. Thank you for sharing your stories, and we welcome you back anytime if you'd like to share more about what's going on down at Galice or where you came from. Now, Klamath Falls used to have another name. It was way back when.
Goodness sakes, that's something I don't know.
Well, we'll have
Link
to
City.
Yeah.
Linkville, that was
you
it.
got it.
I'm thinking, okay, Link.
And you take the ferry boat across to Linkville.
Yes.
And, I heard about the first car. Just really startled people. They didn't even know what it was. Here came this dust ball.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to Journeys and Journals. Thanks again for
Thank you,
being
Bernie.
our guest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.